Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I mean, we have people from all areas of the world, and I'm happy to be here. I am your facilitator for today. I'm Lutfia Dean. I am a youth and advocacy agent. I'm also part of the youth action group of Global Campaign for Education, and I am a researcher within inclusivity in education, within gender, and also health policy. So it is an honor to be here with everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for attending. And, today is a very important roundtable discussion. And I also think that the value behind it is to see that the proceedings of today will be summarized in a policy statement, and these demands will be taken to governments on how to increase the education, the knowledge, the anti-stigmatization, and the equality around, the resources and the funding towards education or children on the learning spectrum and inclusivity in education. So thank you so much for joining. And I felt like it was important to actually put that in the beginning so that we know where we're heading with this discussion and why it's so valuable. So every year around the 2nd of April, World Autism Day is observed globally. And it is observed to spread the awareness about autism as a disorder, and also to support those who are, living with it and suffering from it. And also, I think the most important thing is to allow that equality and that being of fairness. So education focused on children on the learning spectrum is often neglected and underfunded. We have many other areas that, we heighten the discourse around it. And I feel like this is something dear to Global Campaign for Education's heart, as well as us as youth activists. So very valuable. And in light of Global Campaign for Education's education equality and inclusive approach to education, the Youth and Students Office, which is currently being led by Amelia and team, has, as a constituency, found the need to hold a virtual roundtable discussion with speakers from Autism SA, World Autism Organization, to ensure that, not just out there is the knowledge spread, but also we as advocacy agents, as organizations, as people in social spaces that are microcosms of society, are ensuring that, we are knowledgeable about it. We know how to engage on these things. We have the sensitivity training on it. And so I hope that whatever we are discussing in this talk today, ultimately does become something that we live through and that we, encourage in every meeting and social setting. Because I truly believe when talking to inclusivity, it's not only about doing it on these platforms, but also within our realities. And before I go into the order of the day and hand over to our, amazing speakers who are doing the groundwork, I'd like to just say, it's so important that we ensure support levels, and we also use the correct language. So I just want everyone to be mindful in terms of some housekeeping rules. I'm just going to mention it so for our guests as well, who are still learning and we're teaching each other, and no one is supreme within the knowledge. I just want to say that we don't use functioning labels, number one. So we don't say high functioning or low functioning, because these are offensive and it can be harmful. So instead, we will use the terminology that you have support levels that include low support and low support and high support. Secondly, we don't use the term non-speaking, because individuals living with autism do speak, however it may be different communication. So just let's be mindful of that. And then also we use identity first language. So we say autistic person. We don't say autistic person. We don't use that. Instead, we say a person with autism or person living with autism. And be mindful of that language. And yeah, I think that's it. So I just wanted to let that be known of how we engage and the terms of engagement for today's roundtable discussion. And please feel free to take notes, to contact all our amazing speakers after as well. I think Amelia would be willing to also share those networks. So to get right into it, I'm really excited and I look forward to learning and I look forward to engaging. The first speaker of today will be from Autism SA, and it will be Vicky Otle, who will be speaking on autism and the impacts it has on education. So Vicky has began her career in special education after completing her honors in psychology. Over the last 12 years, she has worked with children with different disabilities and different learning styles. She has always been interested in autism. And since joining Autism South Africa, she has had the honor of meeting experienced professionals, but even more privileged to have met autistic adults who have given her so much more insight into this. And I hope that one day, she says, I hope that one day we will live in the world where the autistic voice is heard. So I think, it's someone young again, it's someone who's still learning as well. And she's saying that she learns every day and she's working in this space. So we look forward to what you're going to say. And there's a bit more, guys. Okay. And she's also heading up the Johannesburg branch of the CISO Hub, and she's the first school of South Africa to work with S2C, which is spelling to communicate principles. She's registered as a practitioner with the International Association for Spelling and Communication and work with both the learners at CISO Hub and private clients as well. She's part of Autism South Africa, where she helps out with training when needed, and she designs the work for social media and events. She's happily married and has 2 cats, and she successfully raised a guide dog puppy, Pixie, who is also part of the South African Guide Dogs Association and works as a guide dog. So she's well-rounded, and I think helping in many ways within society. So over to you, Vicky. We look forward to it.
Hi, good afternoon, and good morning to those of you who are where it is morning. Just quickly before we start, Latifa, thank you very much for bringing up the language. I just want to make 2 corrections on what you said. We use the term non-speaking and not non-verbal, and that's because our autistic non-speakers said that they do have words, but they can't speak them. So instead of saying non-verbal, we say non-speaking. And identity first language is actually where we say the autistic person as opposed to a person living with autism or a person with autism. And the autistic community has come out quite strongly in a number of research surveys to say that they prefer to be referred to as autistic person. I think it might have just been a little bit of confusion in the language terminology that we send through to you. So yeah, I just wanted to clear up that quickly first. But
thank you very much for that clarification.
No. As you mentioned, we're always learning, and that's the one thing with autism is it's a dynamic disability, and we're constantly learning from everybody around us. So thank you very much for highlighting that. We do appreciate it. So I've been asked just to speak a little bit about what autism is, and what's happening in South Africa in terms of education in autism. For us, and not even just for us, but autism is what we call a group of complex neurodevelopmental disabilities. And that means that the brain of the autistic person is different to the brain of what we call a neurotypical person. And a neurotypical person is then a person who does not have autism or who's not autistic. The autistic person will communicate differently, they will socialize differently, they will perceive the world differently, they'll interact differently. And it's called a spectrum because there are so many different types of autisms that we see, where we get people who are non-speaking, but we also get people who are speaking. We get people who are who are sensory seeking, and they're looking for sensory information. And we get people who avoid sensory information. We get autistic people who want to socially interact with everybody they meet. And then we get people who don't really want that social interaction. So just like we see lots of different people within the world, we see lots of different autistic people. And there's quite a famous saying that says, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And that's certainly very, very true. So that in a nutshell is autism. And just some of the areas that we see that are what we call differences in autism are your sensory differences. As I mentioned, that can be people are seeking out sensory information, or they are avoiding certain sensory information. You get your communication differences. So some people can speak and can have a fluent conversation using spoken words. Some people cannot speak at all, and they might then use an alternative form of communication. And that can range from iPads to pictures to Makaton to apps on a cell phone to the one that I work with, which is called Spelling to Communicate. There's a whole lot of different types of AAC that we see being used. We see behavior differences. So some autistic people behave a little bit differently. We see, I've gone blank, sorry. So you got your social, your behavior, your communication. We see your sensory. And the last one that I want to talk about is we see our movement differences. So a lot of autistic people also have what we call apraxia or dyspraxia. And that means that they don't always have control over their movements, and they struggle with that motor control and that motor coordination. So that in a very, very, very brief nutshell is autism. And there's a new booklet that we've just released, which you can access on our website. I see Juliet Carter, our director, is on site on the call, so I might ask her if she wouldn't mind popping a link into the chat box for us. And that booklet will give you a whole lot more information on the basics of autism, and just gives a practical guide and a couple of tips as well. And in terms of education in South Africa for autism, we tend to see that there are kind of pockets within the country where education is accessible for some autistic individuals, but not for all. And what we also see is that a lot of our low support autistic individuals, so these are the children and the learners and students who are in a mainstream environment and who do require support, are not always being given that access to support. So they're not always being supported in that mainstream environment. And in fact, we were having a discussion yesterday, I think it was, where we were saying sometimes when you see that more low support child, it's almost like they need more support because they come across as though they're coping more than the child with the high support needs. So our low support children are very, very, very much in need of more support within the mainstream environment. Some of those children will get moved into a remedial environment, into a more specialized, smaller environment, and then they do get that support. But in terms of our bigger mainstream environments, we still need a lot more support happening there. So with government schooling, we do have government schools for autistic children. However, there are massively long waiting lists in most of the provinces. And so often our children spend 2-3 years before they get into schools, if they're lucky. In Gauteng, we've got quite a few autism specific schools and autism units within special needs schools. So the waiting list there tends to be a little bit better, but not always. And what we would like to see is more support for all our autistic children across the board. So that ranges from your low to moderate to high support children. There's just not enough at the moment. And even then, even when we've got these schools and they're built and they look beautiful, and we're told that they're state of the art, our next concern is always what support and what training is being offered to the educators, because it's all well and good that you have these schools available and that these children have access to these schools. But if your teachers are not trained and if they're not being supported, that's just a whole nother ball game altogether. Within special education, burnout is incredibly high, stress is incredibly high, and so we see very high turnover rates in terms of our staff. So without that training and without that support, our teachers are also lost, and they're not then adequately supporting our learners either. So yeah, I think that's my little bit on what autism is and the education profile in South Africa. And I see Juliet has linked our practical guide. So in the chat box, uploaded.
Thank you so much. Okay, am I audible?
You are, yes.
We had one of those IR moments where you're like, oh my God, what is happening? So thank you. I just got kicked out, but I'm back. Thank you
Oh,
so
shame.
much.
No
You
problem.
know, Vicky, I think you spoke a lot to what it is for us as youth organizations and the call that we need to have in order to ensure that we rethink our strategies around inclusive, accessible, and I think free education, especially for autistic learners and students, to ensure that it's not something that is a challenge. The same way any young person can get into an institute that understands and is inclusive of them, it should be the same across the board. And thank you for that, and also for the document in the chat. Please do go to the chat, everybody. Save it. Also, please let's also look at the websites. I think we can keep updated via that as well. So thank you so much for that insightful presentation. So we are now going to have an autism self advocate. That is Dr. Emil Gauss, who has a master's in education as well as a PhD, and is a specialist educator, autistic self advocate, executive member of the Commonwealth Disabled Persons Forum, and the deputy chairperson of the NEC of Autism South Africa. And across the many hats, we also have a president of the board of the International Council of Development and Learning, the official home of DIR and DIR Lutheran. So Dr. Emil has many hats, and I think, can lead us to the right direction of how we as advocacy agents can ensure that we fight for this inclusivity and accessible education and safe spaces. So over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning. It's such an honor to be able to present to everyone today, wherever you are in the world. And I must firstly say happy Autism Awareness and Acceptance Day. I must say that I'm actually quite used to speaking 40 minutes. So I'm going to say what I can in 10 minutes. And just as the coordinator said, I'm a PhD student. I'm an autism self-advocate, which I'm going to graduate within the next couple of days with my PhD. I'm also the president of the International Council for Development and Learning, which is an American-based organization that trains therapists, specialist teachers, and also occupational therapists as well. And I also do a lot of autism self-advocacy internationally and locally specifically. But when it comes to international, I attend a lot of higher political meetings, especially fighting for autistic rights of individuals on the spectrum. And therefore I represent underrepresented groups on the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. And when you think about research as well, I'm also the president of a small organization that does research as well. But anyway, it's such an honor to be able to present to you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to base my perceptions and my points are my personal experience as an autistic adult, but more importantly, what I'm going to I can balance it out based on my experience. Hello, can
Good,
you hear me?
good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that. We seem to have lost Dr. Gauss due to bad network, but he's about to enter right now. And we seem to have just lost facilitator. But over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. Apologies. Yeah, I think I'm now in the right spot. So what I wanted to say is that when you think about from where we were and where we are now, you look specifically at the medical model versus the social model. Now, when you think about the medical model, that is actually where persons with disabilities, especially individuals on the autism spectrum, have been isolated based on their behavior traits, and also the way society has interpreted their situation. When you think about autism, you always refer to it on cognitively, emotionally, socially, as well as physically, with reference to the sensory challenges that these individuals experience. And when you think about the medical model, these individuals' personal traits have been seen as a deficit towards society. Now we are based on autism self-advocacy and based on research that came out and a lot of self-advocates, parents that do self-advocacy. We are trying to change the perception to follow more a social model, which has to do with accessibility, inclusion, a reasonable accommodation for that individual to be accommodated in different sectors. And although we are far in terms of, although we made a lot of progress, we are still far. And when you think about the education model, the education and especially discrimination in and employment, and especially the prejudice that these individuals experience in society. But Prof. Stephen Shaw, which is a well-known academic and autistic self-advocate from the US, in his couple of presentations, he actually refers to the 4 A's of autism. And I will actually want to elaborate on 3. The first A is autism, the understanding of the spectrum itself. Because when you think about reasonable accommodation, in order to accommodate that individual in society, especially in the education sector, as an educator, it is essential that the education system must accommodate students based on their physical, attitudinal, information, as well as on communication domains. And the reason, and one of the main reasons why these individuals are not accommodated within different sectors is based on a lack of education. And that is where autism self-advocacy comes in. We need to change the paradigm in order to change society so they can become more accommodative. So the first thing is we need to understand the autism diagnosis. That's the first A. The second A is about accommodation, but also accessibility. If we can, if we understand the diagnosis itself, and we educate society in different sectors with reference to education in the workplace, because although this is an education platform, we must remember that that child becomes an adult, and that adult needs to be able to be accommodated in the workplace and needs to become a contributing member towards society. So if we understand autism diagnosis and we understand the different the different developmental delays that these individuals experience, cognitively, emotionally, socially, and also physically, then we can accommodate them, and then it can be accessible. Now, what's quite nice in our country, and I think Vicky has elaborated quite beautifully on this, is the fact that we've got a very strong constitution, which is based on the UNCRPD. Now, when you think about the UNCRPD, each country has adapted theirs into their own policies. And that is where the white paper 6 comes in. But unfortunately, and that is what my PhD studies is all about, you've got something called policy compliance versus policy reliance, where you can have the best constitution in the world and you can basically have your own white paper in terms of reasonable accommodation, but it's not always compliant because it's individual's choice in order to implement them. But with reference to my personal experiences, I was placed into a mainstream school as an individual that was non-speaking. I want to use the social model in my presentation. So and thank you for that, Vicky. I was non-speaking to the age of 15. And based on the medical model, I was a victim of emotional and social abuse because the education system during that time, if you think about the late 1990s and early 2000s, they didn't understand me as well. And I became a victim of emotional and social abuse. And it was an extremely difficult time. And I also experienced sensory overload into a mainstream education class in a mainstream education system. I think we were about 62 different children in that class. And I was diagnosed at an early age. And what was quite nice was the fact that there was a lot of support externally that accommodated myself. But yet again, we live in a country where our socioeconomic circumstances are totally different. So from the rest of the countries. So it was extremely important that I receive occupational speech therapy in order to improve my grasp, finer, and my visual perception skills, which helped me in order for me to do that helped me in terms of my academic progress. And what was quite nice was the fact that my parents decided to place me into a remedial school, which was a smaller class, and that was one of the most fundamental parts in terms of my development, in terms of communication. Because as soon as the classes were smaller, my speech started to develop more. And I started to communicate basic sentences like yes, no, thank you. But when you think about the developmental delay, a common thing that parents used to tell, a common thing that parents use after my presentation, they would come to me and they would say, how can my child function quite well in one environment, but as soon as he's placed in a different environment, his behavior changes? And what's also quite important is the environment. The environment must be accommodative in terms of their sensory challenges, but also it must be small with people that are understanding. And that was one of the things that I actually realized later, especially now when I basically analyze my behavior, talking to a lot of parents, doing research. And also, it is very important that we need to accommodate these individuals in different sort of environments, give them the right support. And that was one of the basic things that helped me. Um, and eventually um, I basically wrote matric, got university extension, and yet again, I was functioning quite well academically, although yes, I was basically 16, 17, 18 years old, and my speech was still limited. I I basically functioned academically well, but as soon as I was placed in a different environment, my behavior changed, which was the university environment. So when it comes back to education, we must be able to make sure that these individuals' rights are being accommodated in terms of accessibility, inclusion, understanding the different the developmental delays that these individuals experience, um, in terms of physically, attitudinally, on information, as well as on communication domains. If you understand that basic aspect of the autism diagnosis, and especially building the building blocks as well, depending on the sensory challenges in terms of visually and auditively, in terms of the hypersensitive and hypersensitivity. When you think about my personal experiences as an individual on the autism spectrum, and especially you can also think of my wife, who's also a autistic alexic. Our we experience sensory overload in environments that we are unfamiliar of, and especially in an environment where there's a lot of people. And in terms of my personal experiences, if I'm in a big overcrowded environment which is overpopulated, I cannot see the faces of individuals in the bottom part, um, based on the difference in the environment. But on a one-to-one basis, I'm okay. So we need to be able to understand that and accommodate these individuals on different avenues. So when you think about the medical model and moving into a social model, look, we are in a country, and what I want to say is that look, we are in a third world country, and yes, we can read a lot of information and a lot of research in the US or in Europe, but it's not always relevant according to South Africa perspective, based on the fact that we are a third world country, and there's a lot of influences that are that contribute towards our development, and especially it affects our families and our education system as well. And when you think about the continent of Africa, especially, you've got victims, and that is where I want to base my international self-advocacy. You've got students that are, or individuals on the autism spectrum that are victims of filicide or infanticide, based on the judgment that these families and the communities experience. That is basically in Africa. So it is very important that we consider what we do here in South Africa, what's relevant here, how can we accommodate these families, these individuals here in South Africa more specifically, and where we can get rid of the medical model and focus on the social model towards inclusion, accessibility, and reasonable accommodation. We've got the policies in place. We've got the white paper 6, but it all depends on the training and education of society, so that we can accommodate them, so that we can accommodate these families and these individuals as well. I think that was me in a nutshell. Apologies if I went overboard.
Thank you so much for that. So I think sure that we do have self-advocates. So Dr. Gauss, a huge thank you. And you spoke about such crucial parts that I'd like to just highlight a few in case we lost connection, or just so that everyone can hear the valuable information. So you spoke about the representation of those that are underrepresented, and also the fact that we need to be mindful of also the spaces and the environments that have, you know, different effects on each individual, because everybody has a different way of dealing with different spaces. And as far as we are in the progression for autistic individuals, discrimination and bias is still persistent, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. And it's essential that the education system improves the treatment towards this and students living with this. And we need to definitely do better in understanding autism education and the specific needs thereof, and fund that and encourage that within, different levels of society, and bring everybody to the party and say, how do we all contribute to ensuring that it is something that we see as a reality. So thank you so much for that. And in a nutshell, we must ensure that the education, not just at a surface level, but on a deeper level. And like you're saying, that it varies. A learner may be doing well, and there may be something along the way that changes that. So how do we ensure that we are actually there and supportive of that? So thank you so much. And next up, we have Nawal Al Sayed from the Arab Coalition for All, speaking all the way from Lebanon, and a youth organization that is very close and dear to Global Campaign for Education and the Youth Action Group. So over to you, Nawal, to speak on inclusion in education. Nawal has a teaching diploma in special education, the head of the IST department in Address School, and works with kids with special needs. It's always so heartwarming to see people doing the groundwork. I think it's one thing to do research, to create policies, but to see what everyone on this platform is doing on a daily and living through it and ensuring they make that change. Please keep up the good work. So over to you, Nawal.
Hello everyone. رح كون عم بحكي بالعربي. أنا كتير مبسوطة وسعيدة بمشاركتي معكم اليوم. رح أحكي عن دور المنظمات الشبابية والطلابية بتعزيز التعليم بالدولة. تعتبر مرحلة الشباب من أهم المراحل يلي بيمر فيها الفرد، حيث تبدأ شخصيته بالتبلور وتنضج معالم هذه الشخصية من خلال ما يكتسبه الفرد من مهارات ومعارف، ومن خلال النضوج الجسماني والعقلي والعلاقات الاجتماعية التي يستطيع الفرد صياغتها ضمن اختياره الحر، حيث أن مرحلة الشباب تتلخص في أنها مرحلة التطلع إلى المستقبل بطموحات عريضة وكبيرة. من أهم سمات مراحل الشباب هي أنهم طاقة إنسانية تتميز بالحماس والحساسية والجرأة والاستقلالية، وازدياد مشاعر القلق والمثالية. بالتالي فإن الشباب هم المفتاح الرئيسي للوصول إلى تحويل التعليم لكي يكون أكثر شمولية وتحقيقاً للعدالة. وبمناسبة يوم العالمي للتوحد، فإننا هنا كشباب نرفع صوتنا لنطالب بتعليم شمولي دامج للأشخاص ذو اضطراب طيف التوحد، ونود التأكيد على دور المنظمات الشبابية والطلابية في الوصول إلى تعليم شامل انطلاقاً من عدة محاور. أولاً، تعزيز العمل استناداً على النهج القائم على الحق، ابتداءً من نشر الوعي حول النهج القائم على الحق حقوق الإنسان، والذي يشكل إطار مفاهيمي يستند بشكل معياري إلى المعايير الدولية لحقوق، وموجه في تنفيذه إلى تعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان. لماذا النهج القائم على حقوق الإنسان؟ لأن النهج القائم على حقوق الإنسان يسعى للتعرف على المجموعات والأشخاص الذين يتم انتهاك حقوقهم. فهم لماذا بعض الأشخاص غير قادرين على التمتع بحقوقهم، وتصحيح التوزيع غير العادل للسلطة، وذلك عن طريق إعمال هذه الحقوق عند اتباع نهج حقوق الإنسان في إطار جهود التنمية. تصبح حقوق الإنسان هي الأهداف والمبادئ التوجيهية وتحليل الوضع القائم بناء على حقوق الإنسان. هذا الشيء هو أساس لتحديد الأولويات العمل، بما أن الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة بشكل عام هم من أكثر الأشخاص المعرضين لانتهاك حقوقهم في مجال التعليم، فإن المنظمات الشبابية والطلابية معنية بشكل كبير على نشر الوعي بين الشباب والطلاب بشكل خاص، والمجتمع بشكل عام، على مفهوم النهج القائم على الحقوق والتأكيد على الحقوق المتساوية والعدالة للأشخاص من ذوي الاضطراب طيف التوحد بالتعليم النوعي. هذا أولاً. ثانياً، التأثير في السياسات. من جهة على الشباب إطلاق مبادرات لتحديد احتياجات الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة للوصول إلى تعليم نوعي، ومن ثم عمل تحليل للبيئة التعليمية بشكل شامل للوقوف على مدى استجابتها لهذه الاحتياجات. من ناحية أخرى، على المنظمة الشبابية والطلابية القيام بدور فاعل لتحليل السياسات المرتبطة بتعليم الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة من عدة أبعاد، وخاصة في مجال التمويل والإنفاق بما يتلائم مع احتياجاتهم الأساسية للوصول إلى التعليم، ومن ثم الانخراط في حوار سياساتي للتفكير في حلول عمليات تساهم في حصول الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة على حقهم في التعليم النوعي. ثالثاً، حشد الجهود والمنافسة. لا يمكن إغفال أهمية تعبئة وحشد الجهود وإطلاق حملات مناصرة لحث صناع القرار في مجال التعليم على توفير متطلبات التعليم الشامل. هذا الأمر يتطلب التنسيق من عدة جهات، منها الناشطين بمجال التعليم وخاصة الشباب ومنظمات المجتمع المدني المعنية بالتعليم والمنظمات الدولية والمجتمع بشكل عام. وهنا بالذات يمكن استثمار طاقات الشباب التي تمتاز بدرجة عالية من الديناميكية والحيوية والمرونة المتسمة بالاندفاع والانطلاق والتحرك والتضحية، خاصة بأن المنظمات الطلابية تعمل في بيئة تتيح إمكانية الوصول والتأثير على أوسع نطاق. بالإضافة إلى كل ما ذكر، أؤكد على ضرورة انخراط المنظمات الشبابية في البرامج والأنشطة والتعاون في تنفيذ برامج تجريبية تهدف لوصول لأفضل آليات إدماج الأشخاص ذوي اضطرابات التوحد خاصة وذوي الإعاقة. وفي الختام، إن المنظمات الشبابية والطلابية يجب أن تعمل انطلاقاً من مبدأ المسؤولية، وعليها أن تنتهز الفرص المتاحة للتنسيق على مستوى إقليمي وعالمي لوضع معايير للتعليم النوعي انطلاقاً من محاور قمة تحويل التعليم حتى تكون العملية التعليمية أكثر شمولاً.
Thank you very much, Nawal. We really appreciate that. And, Nawal outlined some key factors about the demands for inclusive education for people living with autism and ensuring that we promote education as a human right and not just a selected human right, but a human right for all. And since people with disabilities need to be aided, youth student organizations need to lobby for these policies and the implementation thereof, as well as for better spending. I think one of the biggest challenges in education across the board, when we speak to gender, when we speak to race, geographical inequalities, is that funding needs to be at the core of it. So thank you so much, Nawal. We're now going to have Vicky represent Petra Delman, who was going to speak on behalf of the Autism Association of Namibia. However, unfortunately, Petra's voice currently is gone. So she's recovering from that. And so I'm just going to do her introduction nonetheless. And then I will hand over to Vicky, who is kindly presenting for her. So Petra is from the World Autism Organization. And she's a mother of 2 adult sons who have autism. And she has been involved in the NGO disability sector in Namibia since 1995. She's a founder member of the Autism Association of Namibia, incorporating Camelthorne Adult Center and Special Needs Network. And she's a member of Autism South Africa since 1993. She's also the national vice chairperson of Autism South Africa for many years, and on the executive for more than 20 years, a specialist over there. And she was a member of the Second World Autism Congress Organizing Committee, which was in Cape Town within 2006. And she's also a council member of the World Autism Organization since 2002, and an honorary secretary of the WAO since 2014. And she served the presidency term from 2022 to 2026. She's a member of the Fifth World Autism Congress Organizing Committee, which was based in Houston, USA in 2018. And she's the recipient of the Rotary International Paul Harris Fellowship Award. She has gained knowledge from autism by reading and researching about autism from persons with autism and from many professional publications, as well as attending or presenting at many conferences. So, her bio is amazing, and I think the work it's really phenomenal, and it's something that we value within society. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to now hand over to Vicky, to present Petra's presentation. And thank you so much, Petra, for joining us despite your voice being gone and everything. And we appreciate the continuous research and representation. It's very valuable. We as young people look up to that work. Thank you so much, Vicky.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Petra, for allowing me to represent you. I think Petra and I have worked together for a number of years now, and it's been a great journey together. So I'm going to read what Petra has sent through to me. Petra, please just let me know if I'm leaving something out. I know you wanted to add a little bit at the end. But essentially, Petra is talking about transformation in states, governments, and civil society. And many countries have signed conventions, but ratification thereof is lacking. And I think we can all attest to that. Many countries have policies, but they have not advanced to become laws. And so mainstream society does not see the need to follow decisions in the policies and is very slow in implementing inclusion in education and society. We, as well as governments and civil society, should invite and empower people with disabilities, and our case today, particularly about autism. We should listen to autistic non-speakers as well as others who do not mouth speak. So mouth speaking is using your oral words and physically speaking. The disability sectors should work together more closely to be able to have more clout and a louder voice. Tanya Melnichik, who is an adult autistic from Cape Town, she's a very strong self-advocate and an advocate for non-speakers, requested that the theme for this year be to listen to and learn from as many non-speakers as you can. And in order to learn more about non-speakers, I'm going to ask Petra just to pop the link for Tanya's website into the chat box. She shares a lot of information on non-speakers, from videos to blogs to all sorts. Then we have Karen Muriuki from Kenya, who states that there's no need for continental awareness and education of autism that is autistic-led in order to change that narrative. Sorry, there is a need for continental awareness and education of autism that is autistic-led in order to change that narrative. And I think that's something that all of us in autism organizations are starting to see, is that we're listening more and more to autistic people. And that quote comes from an interesting piece that Karen was talking about, in which she talks about witchcraft prejudices against autistic people. And that's a common theme that we see throughout Africa. She also sent this out to the World Autism Organization Council and received the following replies. Cheryl Whitman from the US writes, I think in the US, the big hurdle is acceptance for hiring autistic people. Unemployment amongst autistic adults is way too high, including those with a university degree. We need to do a better job of hiring and providing job coaching or support for those who need it. And I'm just going to add in 2 cents here. On our side from Autism South Africa, this is a big problem we're facing at the moment. Petra went back and said to her, true, providing job coaching or support for those who need it, but also providing inclusion training, accommodation ideas, diversity acceptance, and understanding to the neurotypical employers and employees is necessary. Employers and others still don't presume competence and don't give advanced trust that a person with autism can do their job well. Paul Shattock from the UK. The main problem at the moment is the very long wait before diagnoses can be made. At this moment, there are in Sunderland, which is in the UK, 1,300 clients, mainly children, who are waiting for an official assessment following a recommendation from a consultant. Nationally, there are 140,000 in the UK as a whole. It's getting worse by the day. And if those are the stats in the UK, I don't even want to think what our stats here are in South Africa, never mind the rest of Africa. Stacey Baden from Puerto Rico, in the US writes, in regard to transformative changes required from the states and civil society here in the US, we need medical and government services to understand that supports for autistic individuals should be available and accessible from childhood through to adulthood. There should be mental health services that are needed for adolescents and young adults. Support, training, and education needs to be made available to parents of autistic children. Law enforcement and other emergency personnel also need training. And education needs a total overhaul in regards to educating neurodivergent students and funding supports. In general, more education around autism is needed in our society. Bojan Radic from Bosnia and Herzegovina writes, government is doing basics. We have daycare, schools, and centers, and they think they've done their job. But conditions there for kids and teachers are terrible. Also, we don't even have one qualified teacher or assistant in school. Now assistants are teachers who teach typical children because there are less children in school, and for teachers to don't lose their jobs, they're putting them in as assistants. So many children we have that are grade 8 in elementary school, but they don't talk at all and even have understanding. It's terrible even for teachers and kids, unfortunately, and government doesn't care. Also, programs in our schools are from 1993 and have never changed. So many bad things. To conclude, and I think this is from Petra, I can only say we must advocate and inform society and government regularly about the need to make transformation a reality. We must continue our efforts to empower parents and people with autism, to learn about their rights and advocate for them. We must continue our efforts to network worldwide and find good autism practice programs and projects which improve the lives of autistic people and families. Together, we will be stronger. And then Petra's put together a whole list of videos, which I think is really, really wonderful, that you can maybe, she'll pop them in the chat box, that you can maybe have a look at some point. Take time to listen to the UN YouTube videos of the 2nd of April 2023, and take special time to listen to the 4 sub-themes. So the first one is on the autistic perspectives of home, life, and education. We then have on the arts, autistic talent in music, dance, visual arts, and poetry. The third one is on work, which is autistic perspectives on neurodiversity at work. And the fourth one is on policy, the autistic perspectives on policy and advocacy, especially Dr. Natalie Engelbrecht, as well as Elizabeth Bunker from the USA. And she is the CEO for communicationforall.com. And Elizabeth Bunker is a non-speaker who uses alternative communication. We also have from Charlotte Villiers, who highlights that there are some of the special focus or attention on the following SDGs. So we've got good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, and partnerships for the goals. In addition to that, there's a very, very interesting organization, I'm a big fan of it, called the Hussman Institute. And they've released a number of documents, but just to give you a brief summary of them, our perspective is not that autism is a condition that must be eliminated with a cure, nor those with autism must be turned over to be normalized by therapists in segregated settings. Rather, our goal is to provide research and resources to support those with autism within their homes, schools, and communities, and enable learning, inclusion, communication, and meaningful relationships through day-to-day engagement with those around them. And then Petra, I know you sent me something else. I'm just going to quickly pull it up. Okay, and just another post that Petra is going to put in the chat box. At the age of 3, Ben, a talkative toddler, lost the ability to speak, and here is a video about him. He has plenty to say. So that's from Petra. Petra, I hope I got that all right.
Thank you, Vicky. I've got a little addition to make. Thank you for doing it for me. Like I sound like a bad connection at the moment. I'd like to add to my talk. At WAO, we receive calls for help from many countries, especially those that are lesser resourced and war-torn. We need to advocate for worldwide access to telecommunication technology so that online training and learning can improve the next generations. Education is key to a future which provides better chances at succeeding in life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Petra and Vicky. And I couldn't agree any more about how powerful of a tool it is and how it ensures a better standard of living. And those links and the videos, I think, are amazing. Amelia, I'd just like to pose that we also send them out because maybe some people miss it in the chat, network issues. And if we send it out, we have the database of the organizations. We have the information, and I think it's more learning to do, which is amazing. I just want to quickly go back.
Sorry, I have actually sent it out. My talk has been sent out to everybody because it was copied into the invitation for the Zoom meeting. I saw that everybody's addresses were there. But if somebody hasn't received it, I can always ask for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So that's great. I'm happy that it's out there and, you know, the information is disseminated, and we can definitely read on that and learn more. I always say there's no gatekeeper of knowledge. And when it comes to something like this and the value of understanding autism, we need to keep reading and learning and asking questions and engaging. All right, so I want you to engage a bit in the chat box because we haven't, you know, looked at the comments. So funny enough, one of my educators from when I was, you know, in school, Yandisa Chuchani says, speaking as an educator in South Africa, I do feel that teachers are lacking in training, particularly in the public education sphere. And I fully agree. As someone who is not out of school that long and who is in a tertiary institute, you know, Petra provided a global perspective within a presentation about why we need to ensure that we have all these different, I think, lived experiences, if I could put it that way, of different schools in different areas. And coming from a South African educational background, I do agree that we need to emphasize our training, our inclusivity. And then we also had Amelia in the comments that stated, you know, there needs to be more inclusivity in the workspace. I'm just trying to open that, but I will get back to that one. I'm now going to give over to our speaker, Katie Lewis from GCE US, who will be speaking on disability, inclusive education, community of practice, and the call to action. Over to you, Katie.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So I'm a graduate fellow at GCE US, and I just want to say first off, thank you all. And thank you for inviting me here. It's really been an honor on World Autism Day, and an enlightening experience really to hear from such an impressive group of speakers who've covered such an array of topics as well, from prioritizing leadership from autistic people to education as a human right, social models for inclusion, teacher training. I've been listing them as they go and writing people's names down. So it's really been an enlightening conversation and exciting for the range of advocacy that we can take from this together collectively. And I know Nawal spoke to the importance of youth mobilizing on these issues and coordinating and speaking up around inclusive education issues at the global, regional, and local level. So I wanted to take this time to talk about two opportunities for young people to get involved, people at any age to get involved in taking action to support funding for autistic learners and just transformative education for disability inclusive education as a whole. So the first I wanted to talk about is on the topic of better spending. The Transforming Education for Disability Inclusion, a call to action for all children, has been a call to action that we at the GCE US Coalition have been working on since the Transforming Education Summit back in September at the UN. So it really calls on world leaders to commit to transforming education so that every child in the world can access equitable, inclusive, quality education and lifelong learning. As you may know, we now have over 185 signatures, which is really exciting, including Sierra Leone's Minister of Education, Dr. David Senge, as well as UNESCO. So we want to keep that momentum going and make sure that transforming education can reach all learners. There's about 240 million children with disabilities worldwide who, even before COVID, these disruptions to education, they've experienced disparities in learning that we've spoken about here today, whether that's getting accurate supports in schools, in their communities, in the workplace. So that adequate funding is really necessary to ensure that students are supported and are able to be resilient within an inclusive education system. So solutions that support the inclusion of learners with disabilities who are often most at risk of neglect, stigma, and abuse are the same approaches that would support the well-being and success of all learners. So by focusing on the well-being and success of students with disabilities, we have the means for achieving high quality education for all children and young people. So this call to action, which I'm going to share in the chat as well, would ask for at least 5% of education budgets by nation to be allocated for disability inclusive education, as well as making medium to long-term targets for ensuring all learners with disabilities are reached in all education programs, recognizing that at least 10% of learners in any country will be learners with disabilities. And lastly, it will ensure that all education programs and grants mainstream disability and include disability inclusion criteria and targets throughout, because it's not just a siloed issue. Disability inclusion is included within everything. So I'm going to send the link in the chat here, and feel free as well to email me. So I'm sending it in. So that was the first call to action. And then the second is that we at GCE US have a community of practice. So it's the Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice. Some of you may be members here as well. But this is a great opportunity for youth to get involved in conversations around disability inclusive ed, like benefits, organizing collectively as a group. Not only youth members, but we bring all speakers to the table. We have professionals, advocates, students, teachers, parents, caregivers, policymakers, you name it, and we organize each month to have conversations speaking about ranging from large-scale policy issues to the work on the ground, from what teachers are doing, what students have to say. So we really make sure that those conversations happen, and we invite young people to get involved as active members. So I'm going to share some of those details as well here in the chat. So to join, you would just need to fill out this form that I'm going to send in, and then you'll receive information on our monthly newsletter and our monthly meetings, so you can easily get involved. And again, please reach out to me with any questions about this. And I'm excited from what we'll take from this meeting and what we can do together as a group to move these conversations forward and make policy change, and not just talk about it, but actually get to it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Am I audible? Slacked off. Okay, so I was saying thank you so much, Katie. You know, I literally love where you took us, because it's like almost the next section of where we're heading with all the solutions, and let's move forward and let's bring something out of this, because it's always great having these roundtables, but I always fear that we don't take it further. So I really appreciate the information you've provided, especially around, you know, mainstream budgeting. And something that I always recognize is that, yes, stakeholders do budget for education and disability inclusion, but then there's a certain point where they feel if something else is, you know, going south in education funding, it's okay to take those funds and now reallocate it to another sector. And those funds are not something that should be shifted or should be, you know, just, oh, by the way, we can move it. We need more serious restrictive policies that ensure it's a consistent thing, because consistency is what will actually make a difference. So thank you so much. I just want to take us to the chat. So I was saying, Amelia said, you know, we need better job coaching for people living with autism, and actually providing inclusion in the workplace for hiring autistic people. And I think that's something that's really important. We need to ensure that job opportunity, because that's also another thing that faces a lot of young people, and the struggle there of employment and where to next after graduating. And so we need to ensure that there's a greater identification of the need for workspaces that allow for, you know, a safe space for autistic people. So that's great. And then I just want to catch up on the chat. We have Mary Schumann, who said, where could teachers receive ongoing support on how to support autistic learners in mainstream classes? And Vicky gave a really great reply saying, Autism South Africa is available to support educators in the classroom. We offer observations and support sessions. and they are connected to provincial and national offices. And Autism South Africa has a great online course to learn about autism. It's called Hands on Autism, and it's available via the website. So please, let's go back to these sources. Let's look at it. Thank you for the answers, Vicky, and for the amazing questions that are bringing knowledge to all of us. So I think, we've had a lot of great information and overload of ideas and concepts, and it's all about where is this going. So where we're heading with today's meeting is that the Youth Action Group, Global Campaign for Education, YAG, is actually planning to develop and create a policy statement demanding for inclusive education, which is something exciting, and it's a development that we hope to progress soon, and ensure that it becomes something that is implemented. So all of the notes taken today, the messages, the questions, I think it should all be integrated into this document, this policy statement. So I now want to open up the floor to anyone and everyone. It's a safe space. It's space to learn, to teach, to give opinions, and ideas of how we need to tackle this challenge. So I'm going to open up the floor. You can simply raise your hand via the option, and thereafter I will give you the platform. So our guests, this is your time to speak, to give suggestions. We have someone taking our notes. We also have a recording of the meeting. So we are definitely going to ensure that everything said on here is included in our policy statement as the Youth Action Group. So let's get that interaction going. Not seeing any hands. It could even be a question to one of our speakers. It could even be a follow-up to something they stated, or a suggestion or a source that you read that might have been insightful and taught you something about autism or any other disability.
Can I quickly come
Dr.
in
Gauss,
here?
would you like to? Yes, definitely. Sure. The floor is yours.
I just want to say that there was a question that was actually sent just now, considering the AAC device or alternative communication methods that can be used in order for a non-speaking autistic individual to be able to speak. You see, it's quite funny because I actually, well, I won't say it's funny, but I actually received the same question the other day when I spoke at another ceremony. It's actually, it depends on in terms of the developmental level of the individual firstly, but second, more importantly, it also referred to, look, financially, there will always be alternative devices that one can use in order to communicate, but obviously the first one is letterboarding based on personal experience, but also in think of phones. I know that the Apple phones are very accessible to communicate, and they've got also specific devices through the use of pictures. And I think Vicky is also perfect, can also answer that question, that there's alternative ways in order for that person to communicate based on the obviously the developmental level, but also based on the I think it's also based on the developmental level, and also where they are currently in terms of their speech development. But definitely, I know there's alternative devices on iPads, phones. The Apple phone is, I know there's an Apple school in Johannesburg, Sandton, that provides reasonable accommodations for individuals to be able to speak via a technology device. But yet again, it depends on the person.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gauss. I think that really answers it. And we also have some suggestions from Petra, and I think you touched on C2C. And then Petra also says inclusive solutions in Johannesburg work with the Grid 3 program which is not only for speech, but can be used to do curriculum and be used in the classroom for various subjects. So I think this is speaking to, the comment Yandisa raised as well regarding the training is lacking. So how do we fill this gap in? And I hope that we can actually use these sources. I see Tahani put a comment, Amile, I'm not able to translate this for some odd reason, so I'm just going to wait for a translation to come through on that, please. And then Petra also says, Dr. Gao says, it depends on the person, the age of the child, and the ability. So remember, it is very specific. And then we have Aberdeen, who is also from the Youth Action Group, says brilliant engagement and contribution so far, and I completely agree. Anyone else on the floor who would like to make any policy statement, demands, or recommendations of what we as the YAG should put forward on all stakeholders?
We have Azra's hand up first. Please speak, to be followed by Marisol. Thank you.
Thank you. Asra, I think you're muted still. Amelia has opened up the floor for you to take the platform. So please unmute yourself and the floor is yours. I hope we haven't lost Asra. Okay. While we wait for Asra, I'm going to just ask for Marisol to...
Hello?
Oh, there we go. Asra is back. Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation, although I joined a bit late, but it was super interesting and beneficial. So thank you to all of the presenters. First, I would just like to highlight and echo something that you presented about the youth strategy, because even like with UNICEF Libya, where I'm working, we are trying to develop a strategy for youth in general, not just like youth with disability, but we are trying to be inclusive and include youth with disabilities within this strategy. So we are trying like to see what activities could be like they could be involved in. We're trying to brainstorm some activities, but it will be super great to have this strategy that you're going to develop, so maybe we can benefit from it as an office and customize it according to the Libyan context. So this is the first thing. The second thing, I have a request, which is if you could kindly please like combine all of the resources that are sent via the chat, because I'm a person with visual disability, which means I am a screen reader user, and it's a bit difficult for me like to catch up and like to to like try to see the resources that you are already sending in the chat. So if you're gonna like collect them all and put them in a document and send them by laterally via email, I'll be much highly appreciating that. Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Esra. Just to respond before we have Marisol, I think it's possible to definitely send it. This is recorded, so our GCE team will work on sending it out, and we will share this document and keep you updated in the process to let you know as soon as our statement of demand is ready, and we will share it with you. Okay, so I'm going to let Marisol speak now.
Audio. Mute currently unmuted. Alt plus button.
Hola, no sé si me escuchan bien. Yo voy a hablar en español, soy de Argentina. Me quedé con una frase que ha dicho una de las oradoras, que es garantizar la educación como un derecho universal y no como un derecho selecto. Me parece súper importante hoy por hoy poder recalcar esto, y escuchando las presentaciones de los oradores, que la verdad me pareció súper importante hablar sobre el espectro autista. Hoy por hoy en Argentina es algo que por ahí mucho no se ve porque en Argentina no tenemos este problema con el autismo, porque Argentina es un país en donde medianamente estas políticas se abordan y es como que se intenta trabajar conjuntamente, pero sí se ve muchas veces que no hay un protocolo para poder abordar, justamente por eso quería recalcar esta frase de garantizar la educación como un derecho universal y no como un derecho selecto, ya que muchas veces estamos tan acostumbrados por ahí a ver la educación como algo, bueno, general, debería ser general, pero muchas veces no es de esta manera, sino que muchas veces es selectiva. Eh, Personalmente he tenido mi hermano con este espectro autista. Fue con tratamiento que más adelante pudo ir evolucionando, por decirlo así, pero también en cuanto a la educación ha sufrido eh, mucha selectividad, no pudo aprender de la misma manera por ahí que sus otros compañeros aprendieron, y esto es porque, como lo mencioné, por ahí no hay un protocolo en el cual se aborden estas políticas de enseñanza, y por ahí esto es algo que en vez de hacer evolucionar, como que atrasa un poco la educación, y por eso me parece súper importante que se haya dado esta mesa redonda, que hayan podido tocar estas problemáticas y hablar desde su punto de vista, desde su perspectiva, desde su trabajo, que me parece súper genial lo que hacen. Así que nada, agradezco muchísimo el poder haberlos escuchado hoy y el poder también contar un poco de lo que se vive.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marisol. I think it's very important what you're saying, and the fact that even in different regions and across the world, like I said earlier, we face similar challenges in different ways. And we had a teacher from South Africa saying there's not enough training, and then we have you across the world in Spain saying there's not enough resources there. So it's quite shocking to see that we have so many different and overlapping challenges when it comes to inclusivity of education. So it's something we need to think about and put this in the demand, resources, funding, integrational training for educators. Like, it should be something that is part of the package of education, not something that educators need to go and strive to get. It should be a basic training that they receive, so that learners can access public schools and have that source of support and that source of knowledge and understanding that they require, the same way any other learner does. So very important, and we're noting it, and it's definitely going to be drafted into this policy statement that will demand inclusive education from the Youth Action Group to different stakeholders. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to just double check that we didn't miss any comments. I see that there's a comment we have a question, the one that was in Arabic that I couldn't interpret because of my interpreter is lagging. So it said, can an autistic person use a device? So I don't know if someone would like to answer that one.
Lutfia, please can
Yes.
you pause? They're translating the question for us in Arabic, the one that's in Arabic.
Okay, great. So we're going to come back to that one.
They're translating it right now. Just please pause for 2 minutes. I'll tell you when it's done.
Okay, great. Can I so long go on with other comments?
You can just pause. Please, could you translate it? The question was, can the autistic person deal with technology in a proper manner? So I'm guessing this goes to any of our speakers from today, especially I think because Dr. Gauss did cover it. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very important question. And it's actually one that is very relevant. And to give you an example, yes, most definitely, no doubt about it, that the autistic person is dependent and can use technology device in terms of communication. And especially with, if you think about the self-regulation, it is very important that technology, yes, there can be certain times where you basically say time out in terms of technology, but for those individuals in terms of communication, and specific alternative devices which helps the individual to relax, but all in terms of speech, uh, definitely yes. And you see some schools, majority of your schools are using alternative communication devices in order to communicate, especially the use of laptops, tablets, and other forms. So definitely, yes. You know, I just want to give you an example. My wife is an autistic, dyslexic young lady. She can't read and write, and she's got challenges with information processing. And the way she communicates through a phone is by using uh, a speech tech function to help her to cope in particular environments. So yes, I see it as a reasonable accommodation advice for that individual to cope and to basically be part of society. And that is very important. So definitely you must see it as a reasonable accommodation. Yes, if you think about the social mode that we're focusing on, definitely, um, they've, in terms of the information processing communication in society, it can be seen as a barrier, as a disability. But what will be the reasonable accommodation? It will be the technology device that can help them in order for them to be able to to fulfill, you know, their potential, and for them to be able to form part of society. So definitely, it is a very important. It's very important, and some schools are implementing it in a way. You know, there's a lot of programs that's available to accommodate the individual on the spectrum. So definitely there is, and I think, you know, it's very positive. It's a positive. It's a positive for different. It's a positive in different avenues.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gauss. You know, I really appreciate the clarity. We have Juliet Carter who says, so they have to attend another meeting, and they said, my contribution, policies must become legislation. Policies cannot be enforced, but acts and regulations can. And then we had Petra who agreed and said, exactly, Juliet Carter is so right. So I fully agree. As someone who is a policy analyst for the All Africa Student Union, you do realize that, you know, sometimes it's not, and implementation is also a great challenge. So to counter that implementation challenge, I think it is good to say we need more, you know, acts and legislation. So thank you for that. And then we have Aberdeen saying inclusion of persons with disability is awesome. So we fully agree. So thank you so much. I'm not sure if we have any last questions, comments, before we hand over to Amile, because we are close to the time, but we're doing well. Mile, am I missing any hands?
No, you
Asra,
aren't.
is that an old hand or?
No, this is a new hand. I've just raised my hand again. So my last comment, I just wanted to highlight another thing. You were saying like resources funding and like kind of integration training of teachers is very important for inclusion. I would add that one of the most important things also is awareness. So if people are not aware of the inclusion of people with disability, then even the other important things wouldn't exist. So thank you. Yeah.
Press Alt to show or hide meeting.
Hello, do you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, I hear you. And I think that is very important. We will definitely add that onto our list. And education and awareness, like Petra had stated earlier, is something that can be the big change that we need within society. So thank you so much, Azra. We will definitely record that and, you know, elaborate on it further within the demands and emphasize the importance of it. I just want to say before I get off, thank you so much for your patience with all the technological glitches. It's the world we live in today after COVID. We all know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? But I really appreciate it. It was an honor to facilitate this discussion. And I hope that we all work together moving forward and keep doing the solid, progressive work within your organizations, within your communities, and just in your daily life. I think being an activist, being an advocacy agent is something that you just love. You love it out every day. I'm going to now hand over to our Youth and Student Engagement Officer, Amile Dlamini. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Lutfi Dean for being our great facilitator for today. We'd also like to thank you so much to Dr. Gals for engaging us as an autism self-advocate. Thank you very much for Vicky on representing Autism SA, and definitely for the great resources that have been provided by her. Thank you also thank you to Petra from the World of Autism Organization. Your speech that was definitely tabbed and will be shared with other people who have not received it has been of great aid. Thank you above all to all participants that are here today. Thank you to the Youth Action Group that participated today. Thank you for contribution from Ezra and Marisol. Thank you very much. This shows that there's so much groundwork that still needs to be done. And in this policy statement, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this, especially speaking on taking these demands and putting them into a policy statement and ensuring that these policies actually become legislation so that they can be applied. Thank you very much also to the GCE Secretariat and to all our constituencies today. GCE is because of it is today because of all your support. Thank you very much. And may we remember that today's call is on inclusive education, and we will definitely achieve that. Thank you to everyone for coming. The recording will be provided alongside the resources that were shared today, and definitely people will be contacted on contributing to the policy document moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamile.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.